weird. I think there is a world, and I kind of make this point in my talk. There is a world where Pluto is the best thing out there for a specific use case that I have in mind, which is do an analysis, share the analysis, and share it in a way that it's consumable by programs, humans, and other developers, including you in the future.
Yeah, actually, I worked, I think, 1 or 2 years ago, looked into a tool. It's called Redash. It's a little bit, it's different. It's similar to Metabase, and we were quite close to deploy the client, but then the and the colleague who pushed that left the client and went to another one, and then it was unfortunately gone. But yeah, you're right. What that doesn't offer is like it's not a server for other recipes, and it's also not a programming language. It's just SQLs and graphs based on these SQLs and dashboards based on these graphs, which is very useful, but
also not so much.
Pluto and Julia is much more powerful because you can do more or less anything. And but on the other hand, it's a little bit more work to set it up. This is the trade-off here.
So
now,
something that's kind of related. I was talking with someone a couple of weeks ago, and he had like non-programmers writing Julia because they were just inputting data. But if your code is clear enough, then people can also input data straight into your code. It doesn't need to be a spreadsheet or a text box. Like, I think people would feel comfortable writing code if it's simple code. Also for education, I think this is cool. Kind of get people to write small bits of code just by modifying, copy pasting, and then like drag them into learning programming by accident or something.
Maybe some kind of like what some systems offer is some kind of templating, like you can browse and you can see some code examples and then just taking over them to yourself, like a bit similar like Excel is it working when you search for function or so.
Right.
Some kind of a templating, and you can click around your templates, and then you have these templates in your code, in your Pluto cell, and you can edit them like you want to have. Something like that, maybe.
The templates can be like notebooks inside notebooks, of course.
Yeah. By the way, I think Julia can really benefit from a library of snippets.
Yeah.
I found it really hard. You know, Nick, I'm a JavaScript guy. Okay, so front-end. So Julia for me is like a second language, like English, for example. Anyway, so for example, reading a file, it took me more than 5 minutes, which is too much.
Yeah.
Like, do I need to have a function? No, you don't. Then comes Forms and says, oh, remove this code, it's not needed. But you don't know exactly. There is no like, okay, here are 5 examples, pick the one you want. That does not exist.
And I think that's because there's no platform for people to post these snippets, you know? JavaScript has a lot of those platforms.
Yeah. PlutoCon.org.
PlutoCon.org.
As a service.
Yeah, I think an disadvantage of the modularity of Julia is that you have usually to stick around several libraries to do even quite simple tasks like reading a CSV file in a database, which is zip, that requires 3 libraries, zip file, CSV, and data frames, whereas like in Python pandas, it's just everything in pandas. I think this modularity is on one hand very good, but on the other hand, it's a little bit inconvenient for the users, because even if the interplay is rather simple between these libraries,
it raises the bar to enter, and that's a problem.
It's also something I was an idea behind this Tabular library, that with Tabular it's then just one call. Okay, you still need to import these 3, because otherwise Tabular loading would take 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So okay, let's go back. So you had a list of Excel features that you're gonna show in your presentation, and then are there more features that you did not show in your presentation?
Yeah. Okay. So I did not. The presentation is not deep. It's kind of, I saw a pivot table. Actually, I only saw a pivot table in Excel. Like you have the files, you do the pivot table.
Yeah.
And I voice over that the most common thing that people do in Excel is grocery lists and taxes, which is true, but it also speaks so loud of the entry barrier to the Excel. Like it's zero. Just click it.
Yeah.
And usually someone else has already installed it, so you have to fight this. So we need to ask Julia people. Julia people. Yeah. So the entry level. I mean, people can do amazing stuff if they start. But waiting for 20 minutes for plots to compile has a high churn ratio.
Okay. I mean, people are working on this. Maybe we can do something with sys images. But I think what's really interesting is if we can make simple things simple. So something that is already simple in Julia is making an array of numbers. But how simple is it right now to make a table, for example? And I think Excel really like nailed it by having a two-dimensional view where you just click at the place where you want to enter data. And if you only add this, then it's already maybe the program people will start when they are making their grocery list, and then
I think this would be amazing. I think that the table viewer in Pluto is really very, very good now. But yeah, something like entering tabular data. Some time ago, I Googled a bit. I think it seems to be that there are some JavaScript libraries already supporting things like that. But yeah, integrating them looks somehow too complicated for my basically zero JavaScript knowledge.
I mean, so one thing that might be like pretty easy is just add bind my table, and then you do some kind of table input, but then that doesn't store it in the file. So like something we've been talking about for a long time is this like a graphical user interface instead of code, that your code is replaced by a GUI. And so your GUI could be that when you type data frame that you get a little table input inside your cell input instead of like as a bind thing. Okay, so one is entry, like ease of entry to Excel. And what else?
Okay, we have this code snippets.
Code snippets.
I think this is also something Excel offers, which is sometimes really useful.
The debugging thing you showed. Okay, cool. I hope that was nice.
I really loved the animation at the beginning.
That was like one of the default settings in my movie program, so that's why I did it. Yeah, cool. I think we had a nice day. I had a nice day. Lots of cool talks.
Yeah.
Let's see if there are any questions.
Linus agrees with the snippet beginning library idea.
Yeah.
It's pretty important.
That's funny. I mean, we just talked about it with Matt too. With Pluto, you really need the ability to see them as static previews because, Pluto Notebook is just a Julia file. So unlike Jupyter, just a notebook doesn't have any pictures. So yeah, it seems like this is about to be fixed. And then like for JavaScript, you have observable, of course, and then blocks before it and much more like this. maybe Julia can have their own. Yeah. One question from Aditya: when will there be dark mode? I'm still waiting for the pull request. Actually, it just nobody did it, but we did talk about a lot, of course. I think
dark mode was a topic very early, but it just never happened.
I think it's like issue number 1 or something, or at least in the single digits. There's already dark modes by Yelmar. Hey Yelmar, if you're out there. But to build it into Pluto, I think would be fine. It looks like it's not too much maintenance to add it, because that was the main worry, actually, that it would be more maintenance. But if it's like, clean and it would follow your system settings of like whether you prefer dark or light, then that would be great. Write a pull request. Anything else?
We have a great question. Losio998 asks if it's possible to run WebGL D3 and 3JS inside Pluto. The answer is yes. You can run anything inside Pluto because Pluto just runs on your browser. You would have to pass the data somehow, and there is at least one way, which is to interpolate a JSON string from a cell. That would not be the most performant way. You can, of course, use Connor's API when it's available, which is going to be an amazing way, actually. You can just fetch data into the D3, and then the D3 will have, well, it can have the whole page as a canvas, but to maintain the notebook look and feel, you would have to use the output. But the truth is you can do anything. It's HTML, CSS, JavaScript.
Yeah, so I think this is maybe, I feel like an underappreciated feature in Pluto, which is that it just runs JavaScript. So if you're out there and you like JavaScript, use Pluto. It's actually a really fun way to run JavaScript. So you can make your JavaScript code react to anything you write in Julia, and then the other way around, because you can write custom inputs for add binds. Yeah, actually tomorrow there will be a talk about how you can do this. Yeah, and then the second question is what Panayiotis talked about, is how do you get to, like, large amounts of data? And that's something we're still working on, but get in touch.
Okay, and another question from Losio. How do we colorize code inside Markdown cells or inside HTML macros? Is there a way to make HTML, for example, be colorful? I will just say it's hard, and I will pass the ball to Pons.
Yeah, so you would do this using CSS, and I think if you're very familiar with CSS and HTML, then this would be easy. But of course, you're probably not, because you're coming from Julia. But there are packages to make it easier. One of them is hypertext.jl, and there will be a talk about hypertext tomorrow. But yeah, the answer is use CSS or use HTML, and find out a way to make HTML and CSS easier to use inside Pluto, like hypertext tomorrow.
Okay, I think a part of the question talks about syntax highlighting inside the macro. Highly likely. So that is hard because you have to say, dear editor, please colorize this twice. Once as Julia, once as JavaScript, or your second language is inside the string.
Right. Okay. Then I completely misunderstood the question. Like how to highlight different language embedded within your Julia cells. This actually, so we use CodeMirror for our cell inputs, and CodeMirror has other languages where they do this. So there's the HTML mixed mode, which will search for script tags in HTML and then switch over to JavaScript mode for highlighting inside of it. Or it searches for the style tags for CSS and then it switches to CSS. And I think this could be done. So we could write a custom mode, or we could contribute to CodeMirror itself, where inside Julia we look for the markdown macro and then we switch to the CodeMirror markdown formatter. One thing specifically for markdown, like Jeremiah talked about today, Julia's markdown is its own thing, because it's, I think, the only markdown syntax where the dollar sign has two different meanings, and it would be really great if we can kind of port those funky rules to JavaScript, and then you would know like what the dollar signs are doing. But
Exactly, it's hard because you have Julia outside, then you have a markdown, and then you can have interpolation of another Julia expression that needs again the Julia rules.
Yeah, but it would be
So
useful.
non-trivial.
Yeah, it would be useful.
Okay, there's one question from Loziu regarding switching off automatic running of the notebook, and when you have long-running cells, there is on one hand there is already a keyword argument to Pluto that the notebook is not run automatically when you open it. And on the other hand, I will refer you to my talk tomorrow regarding execution barrier. This is a work in progress that you can switch off automatic execution for specific cells and activate and reactivate them.
Yeah,
but
so the
more for that
difficult thing, of
tomorrow.
course, is not turning off Pluto's cool features. The difficult thing is how can we turn it off without losing like everything, like interactivity and all the scope effects and all of that stuff. And so tomorrow, Benjamin will talk more about this. So we're really thinking a lot about how can you do this within like the nice things that reactivity gives you. So the execution barrier is what we call the new feature that Benjamin will talk about. It's disabling cells, but also their dependent cells. And so it respects kind of reactivity in a way.
Yeah. What we explicitly don't want to have is replicating Jupyter, because when you lose reactivity, you lose reproducibility and so on. That has we want to combine the advantages of both worlds.
Yeah, it's also, it doesn't need to replace Jupyter. You always have your choice of tools, and we try to like make one of those tools great.
That was a very political answer.
Thank you, man.
Okay, we have another
I
question.
think it's also like by staying focused on one goal, we're not stuck trying to do everything. Yeah.
Exactly, and on that, I would like to say that we can't possibly do everything. So we must focus to do on doing what we do as well as possible.
Yeah.
So it's important to focus. So another question is about Literate.jl. Is there a way to integrate Literate with Pluto? Like to feed the Pluto notebook inside Literate.jl?
So I only use Literate.jl a little. I actually used it before making Pluto with Nick. Big fan. I was like, oh my god, literate programming, I love it. I don't know, but I do know that there are conversion tools. I know that Literate.jl can generate Pluto notebooks. You can do import Pluto and then Pluto.load notebook. Like there are like internal functions that will give you the notebook, and then you can look at its fields and extract code. So you can also use Pluto as a package to like load a notebook file, get the cells, or the other way around. So maybe you could write something like this.
Okay, the next question is the display of tabular data. Not completely sure what the question is about. A tabular data frame, a data viewer is already included in Pluto. I don't know if you have seen it.
To talk about what we could do better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for viewing tabular data, this is already great because it has a nice display, and you can also dynamically extend. Yeah, as a default, you get the first X rows, I think 10 or 20 plus the last row, and there's a button in between. That means if you click the button, then it loads the next, I think, 10 rows. Yeah, what is missing in the moment is, like we just discussed, the editing feature. That means it's just for showing, which is very good here, but you cannot edit data. Let me just check the chat. Okay, I think, yeah, maybe a question to Losio, if you have seen the database, the tabular viewer, and if yes, what you're missing with that. Maybe, I think, let me just check if I have a notebook open, which I can just share. Give me a second. Too many windows.
So one thing that the question mentioned was searching, right?
Right. Right. Searching we don't have. Just for all of you that you have not seen it, this is the notebook viewer. It here shows the column names, and when you move here, it shows the types, and you have here, it shows here the first 10 data sets, and when you click here, then it dynamically loads the next chunk. And yeah, right, filtering and sorting and things like that are currently not supported. That would be also quite interesting features.
Okay, we should take it to the Pluto developer call to discuss the technical details of searching. It will be very interesting and very challenging.
Of course, you can already do searching when you just use Pluto UI text fields and do the searching in data frames.jl, for example. Therefore, in principle, it's quite easy to do that yourself, but it's not out of the box.
Indeed. And that reminds me, I really want to say that. So one of the coolest things I like to do in Pluto is to write SQL queries and then put one inside the other as strings, because they all interpolate and it all remembers what affects what. So you can implement it with SQL filtering scheme. That would be, and that is nice actually. Yeah, maybe for the next PlutoCon I will show something.
Okay.
The question, just one question about package, but their fonts will have a presentation tomorrow about that.
About what? Sorry.
About installing packages to make it more easy.
Yeah. So that's something we worked on for a long time. You'll see it tomorrow. Okay. In that case, that was it. That was the first day of PlutoCon. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.